This is the 2025 Buick Encore GX, an encore to the Encore that's no longer on the market. Got it? All right, moving on. Now, this thing was spruced up just last year, and some might even call it an encore to the Encore's encore. And well, I just don't like the new look as much as before, but maybe that's just me. Now, I do happen to like the way this thing drives, but I have some questions about its overall execution. Montage!
For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that.
This little thing is up against some stiff competition in the subcompact segment, where we've got players like the Subaru Crosstrek, the Hyundai Kona, and the Toyota Corolla Cross, just to name a few. But I've got to give this thing credit where it's due, because looking at it objectively, it really does kind of have its own thing going on, although it's not entirely unlike its Chevrolet corporate cousins. That doesn't matter too much, just something to keep in mind if you are shopping in this segment. There's also the Trailblazer, as well as the Chevy Trax. Those are two other GM-produced crossovers this size that you might want to take a look at. Same basics, just a little bit of a different approach overall, especially when it comes to styling. But I have to say, whether you're talking about this Encore GX or either of those Chevys, something I just don't understand is the all-wheel drive system, because GM has gone with a selectable system. So you use this button down here on the console and you can turn on or off the all-wheel drive. The idea being, when you don't need four-wheel traction, you can shut it off and this thing will operate in front-wheel drive. But you know, the vast majority of entries in this segment, they use a slip and grip system. So they do the same thing and then just automatically kick in with the rear wheels when it detects wheel spin. That to me makes an awful lot of sense, because this is a sort of set it and forget it system. If you forget to toggle this back on, you won't have all-wheel drive in those situations where you might need it. I'm talking about stuff like black ice. You can kind of mindlessly drive around in front-wheel drive, not really notice a difference, and then when you need a little bit more traction, well, it's not going to be there for you until you hit this button. Anyway, there's only one engine available here, a turbocharged 3-cylinder that makes 155 horsepower and 174 pound-feet of torque. And if you go with the base version in front-wheel drive, that is paired with an automatic, continuously variable transmission, and then going with all-wheel drive swaps that out for a 9-speed automatic. That's what I have in this one, and I have noticed just a little bit of an issue where it gets caught flat-footed when you are passing on the highway. If you go to overtake slower traffic, sometimes the transmission gets caught napping and it can leave you feeling like there's nothing left in the tank. But then on the flip side, all of that torque kicking in at just 1600 RPM, with this being such a small engine, it can feel almost frenetic around town or at city speeds. If you go to accelerate and the transmission is doing its thing, it pulls really hard and it can feel like it's gonna take off with a lot of torque steer. It's an interesting system, but if you're gentle on the throttle, it will reward you with a pretty smooth experience overall. Although I've gotta say, the combination of selectable all-wheel drive and a 3-cylinder engine, you might expect outstanding fuel economy. Not necessarily the case. If you go with the front-wheel drive version, it's rated for something like 7.8 liters per 100 kilometers combined, and then all-wheel drive adds a liter to that, so it's 8.8 liters per 100. But here's the thing, if you go with that Crosstrek that has full-time all-wheel drive, not a selectable system, not a slip and grip system, it is constantly powering all four wheels. It's rated for either 8 or 8.1 liters per 100 kilometers. So it is much better than this thing. And I was driving it earlier this week in front-wheel drive, and I did have it down to 7.5 liters per 100. And then I toggled it over to all-wheel drive, and I'm already up to 8.3 after only another 100 kilometers of driving. Doesn't bode all that well for this thing, considering it is such a tiny engine and it has that selectable all-wheel drive. I was expecting a little bit better. And don't forget, That Toyota Corolla Cross is also available with a hybrid powertrain that burns something like 5.6 liters per 100 kilometers combined, so there are much more efficient options in this segment. Other than that, I would say the drive experience here is decent enough. It's got a very stubby little wheelbase, and that makes it incredibly responsive to steering inputs. And the ride quality, it's pretty good too. Not exceptional. Again, there are better entries when it comes to on-road comfort, but this thing ain't so bad. I'd describe it as having the automotive equivalent of good posture because it feels very tall and upright, but it isn't. This thing actually has about an inch less ground clearance than the Crosstrek, just for the sake of comparison. But this thing feels very upright. I will say you do feel minor road imperfections through the suspension, especially with these 19-inch wheels. But here's the thing, unlike something like the Kia Seltos that has a bit of a similar character, most of those imperfections get absorbed before they reach the cabin, which is exactly what you want. So this thing doesn't feel super stiff and rigid. I'm sure you can hear this rough asphalt underneath the vehicle right now. It sounds a lot worse than it feels in here. And again, that's what you want to see in any vehicle, but especially one as small as this. Again, with those 19-inch wheels and low profile tires, it does a nice job of keeping things relatively isolated. I also have to say, I find this seat surprisingly comfortable and supportive. And I only say surprising because it doesn't really look like much. When I first took a look, I was thinking it was going to be stiff and uncomfortable after a short while behind the wheel, but I was on the road for hours the other day and it was great. And even this faux leather upholstery that you get in this sport touring trim is pretty nice. Now, I personally probably wouldn't opt for this so light it's white beige, but you know, it's not bad considering it is fake. It's pretty convincing. If you do want the real stuff, you've got to step up to the Avenir trim. And then speaking of features, there are 3 trims available. So there's the Preferred, this ST, and then the Avenir. And obviously equipment gets better as you spend more money. But even in the base vehicle, you get heated front seats, a heated steering wheel, this touchscreen, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, both of which are wireless, satellite radio, and a Wi-Fi hotspot. Although those last 2, they do require paid subscriptions. I also want to talk about this screen for a second because it looks pretty good, and when I have Apple CarPlay up, I like it a lot. A weird one though, when you shift it into reverse, the backup camera is very tiny. It doesn't fill the full screen, so you have these bars on either side. And then this other screen, this driver display, I find it gets incredibly washed out, but weirdly not so much on bright days. It's overcast days. There's also this little adjuster here that you're supposed to be able to spin to increase or decrease the brightness, but it does not work at all. I don't know if that's just this tester or something across the Encore GX lineup itself, but it is very weird. So something to keep in mind. These displays, not the greatest. The same goes with this infotainment system overall. It's just a little bit stripped down. I remember the previous system, as well as the Google-based system that GM uses, really feel like smartphones. They've got all these tile icons and stuff, and they make it very easy to get accustomed to. This one has been trimmed down to just the basics, and I'm not in love with it. But you know, that is the benefit of having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, because you can just have your phone hooked up and use that as your everyday infotainment interaction. That's what I do outside of testing the systems in general. It is very easy. It is familiar. Now, when it comes to advanced safety systems, there are quite a few, but I wouldn't say it is a full suite because adaptive cruise control is not included in any one of the 3 trims. When it comes to driver assist stuff, you're seeing a lot of brands put their entire suites in. So to see Buick not do that, even in the Avenir, that's about 39 grand before tax, is a bit of a disappointment. But you do get blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist and departure warning, forward collision warning. Like I said, it is a reasonable selection of features, and then you've got to pay a little bit more to get adaptive cruise control. That's the case here. This one is 40 grand before tax. Not entirely unreasonable. It's easy to spend that same amount of money on just about any crossover in this segment, but then that's where you start to look at a few more of the compromises. Rear seat room is a big one. If you take a look at the Kona or the Crosstrek, there is quite a bit more space in the back seat, but the rest of the cabin does feel like it's well used. Lots of cubbies, even a decent amount of cargo room, behind the back seats and when you fold them down. If I take the front wheel off my bike, I got to get creative, but I can fit that thing inside of here, which is a testament to just how well used the space is. When you add it all up, no, I don't necessarily think this Encore GX is ready for family life, but for single people or even a household of two, I do think it makes a lot of sense because it is straightforward. Not a lot of frills. Even when you start adding options and extras, it still feels very straightforward, and there is a ton of merit to that in my books. To recap, I like the way the Encore GX drives, that the seats have all-day driving comfort, and that there's plenty of torque for around town. I don't like the selectable all-wheel drive system, that it isn't especially efficient, or the stripped-down infotainment system. Overall, I'd say I find the Encore GX to be pretty unexceptional, only not in the insulting way that it might seem. Because not every vehicle needs a thing to make it stand out, and it's refreshing just how approachable this crossover is. Yes, there are more comfortable, spacious, or tech-heavy entries in this segment, but this Buick is about as fuss-free as they get.